So this has been a really rough week for transit in Canada, especially rapid transit. And so I decided to make a video to try to explain to you what's going on, because let's be honest, it can be a little confusing sometimes. Let's hop in. Also, yes, I'm standing up for this video. I thought, why not try to, sort of mix things up a bit. I'm going to be moving soon, as it turns out, and so this background should hopefully get much more interesting. But until then, you're going to have to bear with me with my kind of jail cell-like bare walls. I am not in jail, though, I can assure you that. Now, if you're not already, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos come out, which is a great way to help support the channel. It makes sure that I'm able to keep bringing you regular news and other updates about transit in Canada and around the world. So this Sunday, we got treated to an absolute crapstorm of bad news relating to two of Canada's fastest growing rapid transit systems, the Vancouver SkyTrain, maybe better known as the Metro Vancouver SkyTrain at this point, and the Ottawa otrain. As you may know, Vancouver is currently pursuing two pretty significant expansions of the SkyTrain network simultaneously. There's both the 5.5-kilometer Broadway subway extension, which takes the Millennium Line down Broadway, connecting with the Canada Line, something I conveniently talked about in a video up here, and there's the 16-kilometer Surrey-Langley SkyTrain extension, which is an entirely above-ground extension into the lovely suburbs of Surrey and Langley. Langley in particular is a strip mall-obsessed suburb that probably does not need a SkyTrain extension, but I'm going to go with it anyways. I grew up in Langley. I'm allowed to complain a bit about Langley. It's not the worst place, but it's around fake London level. Better views though. Now this 16-kilometer extension would travel down Fraser Highway in basically a perfect diagonal for that straight 16 kilometers and would connect King George Station, the current terminus of the Expo line, up to Langley Centre. Now great news, both of these extensions are set to open in 2025. Just kidding, that's not happening, of course, because it's bad news day. Bad news week. It's bad news week. Now somehow the Broadway subway extension's opening is safe, and that's probably to do with the fact that construction has already started and that we don't want to admit that it will probably be delayed yet. I'm holding out faith, but these type of projects, especially a big subway project, if it actually gets completed when it's supposed to, I would be amazed. But it is a bit surprising because the Broadway subway is, mostly tunneled. It's interchanging with another SkyTrain line, which is obviously going to be complex. This will be the first real interchange we see underground between two SkyTrain lines, so it's a big deal. Unfortunately, the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain is seeing no such luck. The line has been delayed 3 years to 2028, which really puts into question the tweet I put out a little while ago about how it was very interesting how Vancouver's extensions, which were just sort of starting construction now, were going to be open years ahead of Toronto's extensions, which are starting construction right now. Those extensions are set to open at the end of the decade, and well, now half of Vancouver's are as well. If you're not already following me on Twitter, consider going and doing that, because I do post some decent insights sometimes, and then sometimes I miss the mark and get it wrong, like that. Now, if you're wondering why this delay is happening, well, it seems that funding agreements haven't fully solidified, and I'm sure the fact that the Broadway subway construction and sort of procurement and getting that project off the ground didn't help, nor did the pandemic. And so everything has been delayed 3 years, which seems kind of like a lot because it hasn't been 3 years and now suddenly we're adding 3 years to the project timeline. North America works weird sometimes. Fortunately, thanks to this week's election, in which nothing happened, really, truly, basically nothing changed, things are still go for the SkyTrain extension to Langley, albeit a few years later, which, while unfortunate, is okay. At the end of the day, the SkyTrain network is still being extended. We're seeing lots of progress around the system, and that's all super exciting. 3 years, it's a long time in human years, not such a long time in metro systems, and so I'm sure things will be okay. Unfortunately, this week, Ottawa's otrain saw another major incident with another derailment, which is incredibly concerning for a modern rail system of any kind, anywhere. Now, if you want a backgrounder on the otrain system, check out my video up here, which covers the two kind of distinct lines. There's line 2, which is more of a regional rail line, and then there's line 1, which is the big one. Now, fortunately, and the only reason I'm willing to just slightly about the otrain derailment is that no one was hurt, thank goodness, and the system is set to be shut down for a few weeks now at a minimum to kind of assess what happened. So the Transportation Safety Board, the federal regulator who uniquely regulates Ottawa's system because of its location on the border of Ontario and Quebec, will be going in and doing a deep dive and figuring out what's going on with the system. But I can't help but feel really bad about just the whole state of transit in Ottawa. What exactly happened? It seems that a faulty axle or drive unit caused the train to derail. This caused not only substantial damage to the train, but it also caused substantial damage to the kind of track infrastructure, which is really concerning. Now, after the event, I watched a transit commission meeting. I hadn't watched many in Ottawa, but it was a little saddening to watch because people started saying things that I expected to hear, but didn't really want to hear. Things like, the faith in the transit system is broken, the transit system has been destroyed, people's confidence is gone. Things like that are really concerning to hear, and they're the exact sort of concerns you need to have about a transit system going awry. If you have a great system, like Ottawa did, and you create a new line or you introduce a new service and it has tons of problems, you could seriously damage your transit system. And in North America, people have other options than transit, clearly. And so if you have a damaged or ineffective transit system, people could bail from it very quickly. And that work you did to get lots of riders, it's going to be gone really fast. It's sort of, the typical, you can build a reputation for years and throw it away in a few minutes type of situation. It's terrible. And something I want to remind my viewers is that if you have the choice between driving and riding an unreliable transit system that, is inconsistent, potentially unsafe, and totally unpredictable, we can't blame people for driving. People are going to do what's best for their lives, and transit is something that, as much as I love transit and you love transit, should really get out of people's way. It should get people from point A to B fast and reliably, and if it does that, they don't need to and shouldn't need to be worried about the intricacies of the system. People want to spend time with their families, people want to care about their health, people want to work, and people have to work, and so people buying a car because transit isn't a good option for them, we can't blame them. We need transit to be a good option. What's even worse is that some people don't have the option to buy a car. They do rely on transit. And these folks are really taking the brunt of issues with the Ottawa otrain, because when a bus replacement comes in, it doesn't use the transitway anymore. It's going to be slow, it's going to be unreliable, and it's going to be deeply uncomfortable. And this is not the way to build ridership, build confidence in the system, or convince people that public transit is even a good option for them. And while watching the meeting, while there was talk of privatization and the semantics of motions and the like, there was not really much technical discussion and reflection on the fact that Ottawa built a train system, a transit system, a metro essentially, that doesn't exist in this form really anywhere else in the entire world, Vienna U6 notwithstanding. But even the Vienna U6 actually isn't technically doing all the same things as Ottawa's otrain, so this is really a unique system. Ottawa's system uses 100% low-floor trains. They have a high top speed meant to kind of cover great distances, particularly in Stage 2, which is under construction quickly. And they operate at a high metro-like timetable. Trains are coming every few minutes, and that's not actually easy on the trains. They don't get to sit long at stations. They don't get to sit long at terminals. They're worked very hard. And I think that's something we have to remember. These vehicles are being worked incredibly hard, especially since the first segment is really loading up the trains right at the ends of the line and just pumping them through the center. And when you're working any piece of mechanical equipment sort of at the limits, the chances of failure just go up exponentially. Imagine if, you towed every bus with a car. It would be incredibly hard on the car, and your bus system wouldn't be very reliable. In the same way, if you're just working a train system incredibly hard, you're running high frequencies, you're running high speeds, you're running trains that aren't necessarily optimized for that type of operation, and you're heavily loading every train, that's a recipe for problems. And I'm not sure it's just the infrastructure. The vehicles themselves seem to be problematic as well, which is raising my eyebrows because Toronto ordered a load of them too. Partly because we wanted to avoid problems with Bombardier's LRVs. Siemens, please, we know you exist in Canada. Come over from Alberta to Ontario and save us with your reliable LRVs. We need them really badly. And this is why I think it's actually important that we talk about things like what type of trains you should use on a system, the ins and outs of network planning, how you can build a system for resiliency. Because when you build a system that is just unreliable on a fundamental level, you're sending your entire transit system towards disaster. And seeing what's happened in Ottawa, it honestly makes me a little depressed. And there's a lot of nuance here. As I said, when I went and rode the Ottawa otrain system on day one, it was lovely, but a transit system can't fundamentally be assessed by its one first day of operations or by the absolute best case scenario it operates in. It has to be able to truck through tons of high capacity, heavy use, and it needs to operate frequently, consistently for decades. And it just doesn't seem the Ottawa otrain line 1 can do that right now. And again, this is also sad because Ottawa was a leader in transit for small cities. And while the transitway was obviously not going to be sustainable, and it was a little disappointing to hear people saying like, why can't we just go back to that? Because, you know, a BRT system of that scale is not going to work in North America for so many reasons. But we need solutions. We need to figure out not only how to fix the problems, but how to repair the damage. And so some commissioners in the meeting were suggesting things like a free fare when people come back to the system. And that's the sort of thinking we need to encourage people to give the system a second chance. Something we shouldn't have to do, but something that we do need to do now. Now, can these problems be fixed? I think so, but we're going to probably need to accept some trade-offs. And that was maybe one of the fundamental problems with this line. It didn't have any trade-offs. It seemed almost too good to be true. Now, one of the most complex technical elements of the line that you could drop is the trains themselves. They're 100% low floor, and as I've said in many videos, 100% low floor trains are overused. They're technically more complex than high floor trains, or even 70% low floor trains that are used everywhere in the US, like almost every light rail system uses them. And just simply changing to a 70% low floor unit, which would be incredibly complex, and I'm aware of that, well, that could fix a lot of the reliability issues. First of all, the trains are just less technically complex because the equipment isn't squeezed into these tiny compartments, but they're also easier to maintain because equipment is more accessible. The bogies can move more freely, and the center bogie is typically unpowered. You should also remember that 70% low floor trains are still fully accessible, and I would argue they're just as, if not more accessible than 100% low floor trains. 100% low floor being accessible is a gimmick that I think is fairly widely recognized. It's okay for tram systems, but for higher capacity light rail systems, I don't think these style of trains make sense. 70% low floor, still fully accessible, level boarding, all of that nice stuff. And of course, those systems operating in other places in North America, like Seattle, for example, which has a lot of the same elements as Ottawa's system, they could be, almost plug and play into Ottawa's system, of course, with the necessary signaling and the like. Now, whatever type of train is used on the system, it should also be made lighter. The trains that are being used on Ottawa's system are fairly heavy, and since the system is fully grade separated, there's no reason the trains need to be heavy. They don't have really a huge risk of running into vehicles like trucks or buses or whatever because there's not grade crossings. That could also help with wheel and track wear, which has probably contributed to these derailments in some form or another. Another thing that's worth considering is just increasing the spare ratio. I'm pretty sure Ottawa is operating things pretty tight with only a few trains set aside if things go awry, which they frequently do. That's one problem, and that problem is exacerbated by the lack of pocket tracks. Pocket tracks are just tracks either in the middle of your two mainline tracks or sometimes on the side, though I don't know if it's really a pocket then, where you can store an extra train. Essentially, if you have a problem with one train, you can slide it into the pocket track and slide the new one out, and you have a new, hopefully working train replacing it. Ottawa's system is sort of famous for not including any pocket tracks, I believe. If it does, it's like one or two. Very low number of pocket tracks, not advisable, and a low spare ratio. These things do not help with reliability. There are other problems with the system, but they're going to cost a lot more money to fix. The tight alignments and curves, especially going to areas like Herdman Station, those could be fixed, and the design of them is just highly questionable. Some people on Twitter have pointed out that if you realign the tracks to be closer to the Via Rail tracks when heading towards Tremblay, you could have made those curves softer, which would have eased things and made derailments, track wear, and wheel wear less of a big issue. In some dream world, we might be able to convert the system to high floor, but that's a fundamental thing that you're just not going to be able to change now. And that's the sort of decision that was mistakenly made to go to low floor trains instead of high floor. Basically everything else about Ottawa's system is equivalent to the Vancouver SkyTrain or the REM in Montreal. It's a metro system, and those low floor trains, they just don't fit with that. That said, clearly there is a solution. We may not like it. It may involve new trains or slower operations, which are less convenient than we'd like. That could even look like rebuilding some sections of problematic track. At the end of the day, Ottawa's going to have to spend even more money for a transit system that isn't functioning properly. And if you didn't already know, the risks associated with the Ottawa LRT project are apparently already having impacts on the cost of other transit systems in North America just because of how many problems the system has had. Now, with all of this bad news, you might expect me to be feeling terrible. And while I don't feel great, this is happening during the pandemic, so at least the ridership is slightly lower, and if problems can be fixed before people really start coming back to work en masse, that would be a silver lining, I suppose. I also don't fundamentally think that the Ottawa system can't be fixed. I just think that we may need to accept some things that we're not really super excited about. At the end of the day, though, transit needs to operate, and it needs to operate reliably because people cannot just take a break from their lives. Now, with that out of the way, please do stay tuned because I am going to make a video about a time when I truly did feel really bad about transit in Canada, which is going to be entitled
The Transit Dark Ages,
or something along those lines. Anyways, until next time, be safe, stay happy, ride transit, and thanks for watching.